Okay, and hey everyone, welcome to the Jack and Jill podcast. Today we're going to talk about the hearings that were last week, the big tech hearings at the, what was it called? Congressional
Yeah,
monopoly hearings where they had, who did they had again?
the four big tech companies were there. They had Amazon, Google, Facebook, and I
And
think that's it. Actually, was there one more?
Amazon, Google, and Facebook, and they didn't have Twitter, they didn't have Microsoft. Um, they had somebody else. How could I have forgotten? They must have not asked them enough questions.
They were really going after Bezos and Zuckerberg, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it was mostly well, and Google too. Yeah, those are the only three that I remember. Who else was there?
I'm just looking it up on npr.org, who wrote a very good summary of what happened
Uh huh.
during the hearing. So they had Facebook's Zuckerberg, Amazon's Bezos, Google's Sundar Pichai, and Apple's Tim Cook.
Oh yes, Apple. Oh yeah, Apple didn't make much sense at all in that regard. They gave Apple a lot of shit, and yeah, I think Apple as a company right now is a bit overvalued, but in terms of their ability to control the market, that's really preposterous. And here's why. And this is something that most people don't realize living in the United States. But when you live in the United States, you think that Apple has 50% of the market, or 48 to 50% of the market, with the other 50 going to Android, pretty much,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's pretty on the money in America. But if you go to Europe or the rest of the world, Europe, Asia, Australia, New Zealand, pretty much everywhere, uh, Android dominates, which is Google, right? And but
Well,
Android,
Android can be purchased by any manufacturer, right? Or licensed by any manufacturer.
it can be licensed by any manufacturer, and in fact, it's open source. So even if you don't license Android, you can get the base operating system for free, essentially, because it's open source.
Right. So if you're a manufacturer, for those of us who are not very technical, um, you can make the hardware for a phone, and then you have to figure out what kind of software you're going to install in it. So it makes everything flow and work together nicely, right?
Or so it just works, because otherwise it's just a computer.
Right.
A phone is just a computer
And
with a screen, and then that's a touch screen
right. And
and a
there are
modem.
two main operating systems right now in the market. I suppose there's a third one.
What's the third one?
BlackBerry? Does
No, BlackBerry is no. BlackBerry is long dead. All of the BlackBerry's stuff switched over to Android. Pretty much everything runs Android. Samsung was developing an operating system for a while called Tizen, or something starting with a T. I can't remember, but they never really. Can you look it up? Samsung's operating system, Samsung's phone operating system. I think it's called Tizen or something like that.
Looking it up now.
And they tried to make it popular. They started by making it for their watch, and it's something that they also use in some of their embedded devices, because
Is it based on Android?
no, it's their own thing. It's based on Linux, I believe. Well, it's not really based on Linux. I think it's their own thing. It's based on maybe a Linux kernel, just like Android is based on a Linux kernel, but that's just the kernel that's running underneath the Android virtual machine with
Yeah,
like
it's called Tizen. According
Tizen.
to Wikipedia, it says Tizen is a Linux-based mobile operating system backed by the Linux Foundation, but developed and used primarily by Samsung Electronics. The project was originally conceived as an HTML5 based platform for mobile devices to succeed MeeGo. Samsung merged its previous Linux-based OS effort Beta or Bada into Tizen and has since used it primarily on platforms such as wearable devices and smart TVs. Much of Tizen is open source software, although the software development kit contains proprietary components owned by Samsung and portions of the OS are licensed under the Flora license, a derivative of the Apache license 2.0.
Yeah, yada yada yada.
Advanced
Okay,
Beta.
we got it. So basically, it's just a Linux alternative that runs with HTML5. So all of the apps for it, maybe some of the like the basic apps for it are developed in HTML5, which is which is JavaScript and HTML and
Let's go back to Apple. I'm sorry to
yeah,
cut you
yeah,
off.
for sure.
So, Apple could have a greater share of the market if they theoretically licensed out their operating system to
Yeah,
other
but they're not gonna do that. That's not
hardware
their business.
manufacturers.
That's not their goal, and that's not their business.
Right.
Yeah.
So why do you think Apple is so valuable right now? I believe on Friday and even today they became one of the world's wealthiest companies. Like it's like trillions of dollars.
Well, they've been there for a while. I think they're at their current market cap. That would be like what 1.3 trillion or so. Which is a little disappointing because I don't think that they're worth that much, and as a result, I would be shorting it, but I'm not.
They're $1.9 trillion.
Okay, so they're coming down a little bit actually. I think they overshot quite a bit. It will be interesting to see what happens when they release the new phones. The problem with Apple is, as much as I love them, everything we have is Apple, and they used to make great software that went on exceptional hardware. Now they make decent hardware with somewhat buggy software. If I'm
An
smart.
anecdotal story about that is last October, right? We purchased an iPhone 11
Mm-hmm.
and for to gift it as
Yeah,
a
as a
gift.
gift to the relative.
Yeah, and we were trying to use the Photos software, right?
Uh-huh.
The Photos app, and it was so buggy.
Yeah, it was incredibly buggy. You couldn't select photos. You would select photos and they would become unselected. It would crash randomly. And it's not just that. Many other apps, there's misalignments, UI misalignments all over the place where things are supposed to be centered, but they're not quite centered because somebody forgot to erase a space, like a hidden leading space in front of a text. There was all
And a lot
kinds
of
of things.
inconsistencies in the titles or headliners of pages.
Yeah, UI inconsistencies are just enormous. I think primarily it's feature creep that's happening with Apple. They're building too much in, and then they're not allowing the market to take care of some of these needs. And at the same time, but let's not concentrate there on
That's
Apple.
true.
My only
But coming back to the four big tech hearing in Congress, we should focus on how Apple or how these companies have began to monopolize American societies. And
well,
for example,
so hold on. Let me back up though, because the thing that I wanted to though point out is I think out of the four companies that are out there, again, let's recap the four companies that were there: Facebook, Amazon. What do we have? Facebook, Amazon, Apple, and who else was
Google.
there? And Google, yes. Sorry. So out of those four, Apple seems like the least monopoly-like company on the market. And the reason for that is because people always confuse monopoly with the company basically not letting you do whatever the fuck you want to do, right? That's something.
I think the government's gripe with Apple is that they don't allow them to have a backdoor to Apple's securities.
Well, that's what their
System.
gripe is, but that's not what they're stated. What they're stated in the hearings is that they're unhappy with Apple because Apple does not allow third-party developers to install apps directly on the iPad or on the iPhone. On the iOS devices, you have to install the apps only through the App Store, only through the store, the App Store that Apple provides.
So they're the curators of the Apple experience. I'm sorry, the iPhone experience, right?
Yeah, and
Do you think that's wrong? Do you personally think that's wrong? Because to me, it makes sense to pay somebody to curate what goes on my device.
I don't think it's either wrong or right.
Well, it kind of gives me a sense of security that I'm not installing a virus or something like that.
But what I'm saying is, I don't think it's either wrong or right. What I'm saying is, I think it's a different philosophical approach to the reality of the situation. So the reality of the situation is you could have Android, and if you have Android, then you could download apps, and those apps have access to everything on your phone. And there's a lot of security flaws. I mean, of course, there's a lot of security flaws in Apple's operating system as well.
Mm-hmm.
But an Android, nobody is significantly verifying those apps. Those apps are not controlled. So let's say Google bans a particular app in your location. Well, you can just download a file for that app. You can just download the APK file and you can install it on a Google device, on an Android phone, and it'll run on your phone. It'll run very happily. But the problem with that is that if you look, for instance, at denial of service attacks, DDoS attacks. So denial of service attacks is when a group of hackers decide to attack a particular service, for instance, Twitter, right? So they pinpoint all of Twitter's servers, and then they just use their army of bots, and bots are just compromised devices that are owned by other people. So compromised, and nowadays it's mostly compromised Android phones, right?
Mm-hmm.
And most of these compromised Android phones have 4G or 5G connections, so they're capable of quite a significant throughput in terms of how much data they can send out and receive.
Wait, so you're saying that we have zombie phones?
Yeah, there's zombie phones all over the place.
And this will happen without the user, the person who owns
The user
device
will have no
knowing?
clue what's happening. Yeah. Your phone will heat up. If your phone randomly heats up while sitting somewhere where it shouldn't be heating up a lot much, if you ever pick up your phone and it's like really really hot and you weren't using it and it was just sitting on a desk and it wasn't like exposed to direct sunlight or something like that, obviously, then more likely than not your phone is compromised. Or if you ever get like a huge bill, or if you run out of your data really fast and then you're like, well, I haven't really used my phone that much. How did I manage to run out of my data so fast? Right? A lot of the times, well, actually, most of the times, it's going to be because your phone is compromised because you downloaded some kind of game or some kind of, app.
Okay, so these apps are disguised as like games and like porn or whatever people watch on their phones, right?
Yeah. But the point is that you can get your phone infected, and once you get your phone infected, it can do so. That can happen also with an Apple phone. But what's telling is that zombie phones out there are Android phones. Almost none of them are iPhones, and that's because Apple does have the ability to shut down, unless your phone is jailbroken. Apple does have the ability to shut down any kind of code that they find malicious, whether it's code that's running in your phone right now or code that has run in the past, that you downloaded in the past in the app. If they find out that that app is malicious, they can revoke its privileges and can remotely shut it down on every phone in the world that runs iOS, right? So basically what you're doing there is you're sacrificing some flexibility and some ability to perhaps find more apps available in exchange for privacy and not being hacked and not being a tool of hackers. So I think that's just a business decision that Apple made, and I think the government would have a legitimate argument that Apple is a monopoly if Apple was the only company selling phones. But the fact of the matter is, again, this is something that most people don't realize, but what's the actual market share of iOS in the world?
I don't know, 20%?
No,
10%?
less.
Less than 10%?
Actually, look it up. It's like it depends where you are, but worldwide it's like 15%. No, look it up. Worldwide market share iOS. It's gonna be like 15%. Something like 15%, and in places like.
So here we have this.
So what do you see? What do we have? It's gotta be pretty low, and that's my main
It
argument.
says here that according to T4.ai, the chart shows smartphone market share from 2018 Q1 to 2019 Q4, Apple iPhone market share in the smartphone market was 20%.
When? Where?
At the end of Q4
Where?
2019. Give me a second.
Is it worldwide or is it in a specific location?
Give me a second. Apple. Worldwide smartphone market share. Apple is
It's well below.
15%.
Yeah, it's 15% right now, and it's actually It's actually
No, I'm sorry. That's wrong. That's Huawei's. Apple, 20%. They used to be 10%, but now it's 20%. You can look at this graph. It's kind of difficult because they chose different shades of blue to signify three companies like Huawei,
Oh, that's
Samsung.
terrible.
Yeah, it's
No, it's
it's not
terrible.
very easy to
Oh, well,
differentiate.
hold on a second. Huawei, Samsung, Huawei, Apple.
Oh,
Oh yeah, Apple
this
has
could
a
have
group.
happened as a result of the iPhone 11 that was very affordably priced.
No, 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 no. This is worldwide some market share. That makes no sense. The market share doesn't move from 13% to 20% in one quarter. Um, this must be sales. Global mobile OS market share. Uh, let's see. Other iOS. Yeah, it's 20%. Yeah, 22% right here. Share in base. Global computer market share.
Been like 10-ish%.
Yeah, it's been 10ish percent. This is though sales. So
And how is that different than smartphone market share? So
well,
if you're buying a phone, that's equivalent to you using that phone, isn't it?
no, of course, but the market share in the world can also consist of people who previously purchased the phone. They don't have to. So again, you do understand that the market share for a company cannot shift from 13% to 20% in one quarter,
And
right?
1 quarter is 3 months. Yeah.
Because one quarter is 3 months. That just cannot happen.
It's illogical.
It's illogical. So this is just sales, but the point is that it's under 20%.
Unless there is a triggering event.
Yes. And for a smaller market too. So if you had a small market can shift that quickly. But a large market with such penetration like smartphones, there's no way that's going to shift that far. So the point is that it's well under 20% for the whole world in terms of how much of that is controlled by Apple. It's about 50% here in the United States. But that we make up for it, and then in the rest of the world, it's much smaller. It's like 15% or 13%. Right, in China and India,
But
it's like at 5%.
Apple does have a little bit of a monopoly on wearables because they're 50% of the market share of like smart watches.
Yeah.
And they also have a bigger share of the market with their iPads. Like they have 30%.
30 or 40%. I mean, realistically, for the iPads, they have something like 90% of the market, of the tablet market, just because of all the other tablets, like nobody really buys them. And
anyways, let's get back to the big tech hearings that Tim Cook.
No, but you're missing the point, though. You're missing the point,
Okay.
and so are the listeners. The point is that Apple is not a monopoly. They can't be. You can't be a monopoly when you own 20% of the market.
That's true. That is true. Compared to Facebook or Google,
Yes, Google owns 90% of the market. Not of the cell phone market. They own 90% of the search market.
Yeah.
Facebook owns 90% of the social media market in the United States. Now, in China, that's a little questionable. But in the United States, Amazon owns... Okay, Amazon is 40% of the retail market here in America, but they're growing really fast.
Right.
And really aggressively. Apple is not a monopoly in any sense of that word, other than that Apple does, quote unquote, stifle competition, but that's
Okay,
it's a trade-off.
I guess the government is trying to say, or maybe I got this wrong, maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. They are a monopolist of the App Store. And that's what the government tried to say. Why the hell are you why the hell do you have control of the App Store so tightly? Why aren't you letting third party apps be in your part of your ecosystem.
Why does my DeVolt drill not take Milwaukee batteries? They're same batteries. They're made out of lithium ion. In fact, on the inside, they're the same exact cells. They're 1820 cell, 1860 cells rather. Why is it that my Milwaukee drill does not accept DeWalt batteries?
Milwaukee has gone through the trouble of making this battery specifically for its tools, right?
So Apple has gone through the trouble of
Making an app
making an
store.
app store and having people who only qualify to upload apps into the app store upload apps to the app store.
Yeah.
That's see, people really want it to be like, oh, we want App Store to be free for everybody. Yeah, okay. Who's gonna pay for the hosting? Who's gonna pay for the people who need to review the apps? Oh, we're just not gonna do that. Oh, okay. Well, that's the value that people see in these phones. If they don't see that value, then they can just get an Android.
Maybe the government, yeah, you're right. And maybe the government or the Congress realized that this was the case, that their case against Apple being a monopoly was very weak. And this is why they did not focus a lot of time on Tim Cook.
Yeah, it just pissed me off. But okay, so let's drop Tim Cook. Apple is clearly not a monopoly in my mind. They're doing a lot of stupid things, and I don't like them for it. But they're not a monopoly. The one that they hit the most, it seems like, was Facebook. And Facebook, by all logical standards, is in fact a monopoly on social media, right?
Right.
But the kind of things that they were targeting Facebook with didn't make a lot of sense to me. Because what they were targeting Facebook for is primarily for their either lack of censoring conservatives or their too much of censoring of the conservatives. Right, so you would listen to these interviews, or you would listen to these hearings, and it would literally be one after another. You would have one senator or congressman, I forget which house was doing the hearings, but in any case, one congressman saying, "Hey, Facebook, why are you censoring conservatives so much?" And then the very next congressman would be, "Oh, why are you not censoring conservatives enough? Don't you know that they're all racists and Nazis?"
Right. Those were the Republicans. The Republicans were really focusing on freedom of speech.
Well, not for, see, that's the thing. The Republicans were not focusing on freedom of speech. They were focusing on their freedom to speak, which is a very different than focusing on freedom of speech. The Republicans have no interest in protecting freedoms of speech. They are only interested in protecting their ability to speak.
Right. Right. But I also seem to recall that they focused a lot on Facebook's acquisition of Instagram in 2012 and making a case that why the hell did they purchase Instagram in 2012, how, for $1 billion? I mean, did they not see that this was destroying the social media market competition at the time?
Yeah, but okay, so that is another really false argument in my mind, right? Because the way I see it is if you run a company, and you run a company that, instead of Facebook, let's make something more inaccurate. You run a company and it's a Italian restaurant, something very simple. And you notice that 5 blocks down the road, there is another restaurant, one that doesn't sell Italian food, but one that sells, I don't know, paninis. And your customers, which is, I guess, kind of Italian food, but not really Italian fast food, so to speak, right? And then you think about it, and you look at it, and it's like, hey, a lot of our customers go there for lunch, and then sometimes they come here for dinner. So you know what we should do? We should buy the panini restaurant, right? I don't
Right,
know,
yeah.
or fast food joint
Yeah,
player,
expand our
and
offerings.
expand that. Yeah, and then you go.
Because they pair well.
Yeah, you go with, and then they say like, oh, but you threatened, Instagram, and because Mark Zuckerberg at the time said that they were developing a competing product, and if Instagram didn't sell themselves to Facebook, then they would simply develop their own product, right, and try to compete with them, right?
Right.
Well, I mean, how is that any different from from a restaurant owner, like Italian restaurant owner in particular neighborhood, going over to his competitor 3 doors down who sells paninis and say, "Hey, I want to buy your restaurant for a fair price." Instagram got a very fair price for that product at the time,
Right.
right? I want to buy a restaurant for a fair price, and just so you know, if you refuse to sell it to me, I really like this lunch crowd market. We don't get a lot of that market, so I'm gonna start competing with you, and I'm gonna do the same thing. You know, you don't have a patent on paninis,
Right.
and it's the same thing. Well, at that point, Instagram didn't have a patent on posting pictures on the internet.
Right.
Facebook could do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, all they did is they had the ability to do like filters and things like that made people feel special about their photographs.
Mm-hmm.
And Facebook could have developed that technology relatively easily, but they chose to buy the product instead because they were buying a bunch of customers.
And like you pointed out earlier, it's not like they just neutralized the competitor and closed down this company. They actually added this feature, the Instagram feature, to their offering. And they also allowed this company, Instagram, to exist kind of removed from Facebook.
Yeah, I mean,
the platform. They didn't integrate it directly onto Facebook.
Yeah, they did and they didn't. What they did is they integrated or combined all of their back-end operations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which allowed Instagram to grow much, much faster than it would have otherwise, right? Because in terms of the server infrastructure, in terms of the content delivery network that Facebook has.
So they had all the chops to scale up Instagram.
Yeah, because scaling at that rate, people think like, oh, scaling, who cares about scaling? Well, you don't understand. Like most people don't even comprehend how quickly and what amount of data those companies operate at.
Well, you can kind of think about it in the restaurant analogy. If you're running a restaurant with 5 people, scaling it up to 100 people, 100 employees, is going to definitely be a challenge, right?
Yeah, but again, the because this also ties back into Facebook's ability to police what is posted on Facebook, and Facebook's ability to either censor people or not censor people, right? And we can talk about it in a second. Actually, that's an interesting offshoot topic that it's actually worth exploring.
Mm-hmm.
But generally speaking, what people don't realize is just how much, or it's especially pertinent for something like YouTube, how much data they actually take in. So another example to think about is if you're like, let's say you're an average person and you have either a laptop or a phone, pick it. Let's say you have a brand new top of the line phone with like 500 gigs of storage,
Mm-hmm.
and you think of yourself as a big shot, and you're like, "Ooh, I have a nice phone." Well, if your phone was the YouTube server and it
Mm-hmm.
was just handling the take-in of footage that had been uploaded, it would run out of storage within the first 10 seconds of being connected to the network.
Mm-hmm.
It would run out of storage in the first 10 seconds
Mm-hmm.
of being connected to the network.
Mm-hmm.
That's how much data YouTube is not sending out, taking in at any one moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then people say, oh, why can't they do a better job policing the videos on YouTube? How?
Yeah.
So
Your guess is as good as mine.
So as a result, people are always...
Well, they could just invent super fast AI, I suppose, to look at the footage.
Well, that's what they do. So they
Yeah.
they look at they use AI, they use Content ID, which is to look for copyrighted content, and they analyze it, and it happens faster and faster and faster, but it's still not instantaneous. But the problem with AI is, especially for things that are more sensitive, AI doesn't work so well. AI is more of a sledgehammer, right? So AI can differentiate between, it can classify content. It can say,
Right, I can tell the difference between a car and a slice of pizza. Or a hot dog.
yeah, it can classify those things.
Right.
But can it, for instance, classify a car that's painted like a pizza? Or shaped into a slice of pizza, right?
Right.
Like for promotional reasons or whatever. So AI is still at its very early stages, but also more nuanced things it has no ability to do. Like so
Well,
for
this is why Facebook has an army of real humans going through images,
well
training these algorithms.
well, and that army of real humans is susceptible to bias, is susceptible to other problems. So, for instance, that army of humans gets like a split second to make a decision on whether or not something gets demonetized, right? Because these people are working. See, the other thing that we don't understand is Facebook doesn't do this work, right? They do to a certain extent, but a lot of this work gets farmed out to third-party processors in India, in Asia, and that those third-party processors are piecemeal operators, or not piecemeal operators, they're piecework operators, meaning they operate based on how many videos and how many pictures or how many things you go through in a day, and then basically you're going through pictures and you're like, okay, good, bad, block, not block, demonetize, not demonetize, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're just sitting there doing that
Mm-hmm.
as a human, and you only get like a split second to really make a decision. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of mistakes to be made. This is why I always, get kind of a kick at when people yell at Facebook or Twitter saying, "You demonetized this post. How could you? It's clear to anybody who would take even a second to research it." I'm like, yeah, but nobody did take a second to research it. Why? Because the people who we pay to do that get paid very little.
Mm-hmm.
And they get very little time to do the job that they do.
Right.
And if they got paid more, then Facebook would be bankrupt and we wouldn't have it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think what's happening is people are just refusing to acknowledge the fact that they're getting something for free, which is actually worth a lot of money. Right?
Yeah. Because of the management of the media. Somebody has to store it, somebody has to
Filter it,
filter it, somebody
store
has to
it.
back it up, somebody,
Yeah.
It's a lot of work, and you don't think about it.
Yeah. You don't think about it. And the only way it could change is, it's just like with news media. So with news media, we always get these people who say, "Oh, the news right now sucks. The news right now is really terrible." Blah 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 blah. Right? And they're not without a point. They're 100% correct. The news media is right now awful. But when was the last time you paid for a newspaper? When was the last time you paid for any kind of informational source? Most people don't pay shit for those things.
Yeah. And so the media is incentivized to go after where the money is.
Yeah,
Go
and the
after
money is in clickbaity articles, and the money is think about it this way: if you buy a newspaper because you like reading that newspaper, and that newspaper provides you value in terms of how they analyze and digest stories for you, right?
Right.
Then the incentive for the newspaper is to have quality writers that will write the kind of stories that you want to read, thus incentivizing you to buy more of their newspaper in the future.
Mm-hmm.
The incentives for current era newspapers is to give you clickbaity shit, so you would open it, watch their commercials, and then read for 10 seconds, realize it was written by a moron with lack of even a third grade education, and then close the page and move on to the next one, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they already got their pennies
Right.
that they collected out of you,
Yeah.
right? For the advertisements and such. So they don't give a fuck. And it's the same thing with social media. If social media is incentivized by your intention, not by how useful it is to you, right?
Okay.
So Facebook's economy is an attention-based economy. The more you pay attention to Facebook, the more successful they become, right?
Right.
And then people say, well, that's not right. That's not right because they're hijacking our attention. They're hijacking. I'm like, okay, but do you value these? If you don't value these services, then don't use them. It's that fucking simple. The government isn't standing with a gun to your head. Mark Zuckerberg isn't holding a knife to your throat while shoving Facebook in your face, right?
Right.
Don't fucking use it. But if you want to use it and then you want to bitch about the fact that it doesn't do what you want it to do, uh,
Steals your
or it steals your
information.
information and steals your attention,
Mm-hmm.
then pay for it. And when you pay for it, if people actually had to pay for the amount of hosting that is required to perform the job that Facebook performs, right? If people had to pay for the amount of hosting that is necessary to post all the bullshit that they post on Facebook and on YouTube and on Twitter, etc., they would be paying like $50-$60 a month just for hosting alone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe less, maybe more, but on average, a good quality hosting provider will run you about $5 for like 20 gigabytes of storage and for about a terabyte of data transferred per month, right? Now, if your story goes viral, you can easily pull 30, 50, 60 terabytes just of transfer.
Mm-hmm.
You take a video.
Is that 30 or 60 gigabytes of transfer per day, per
Well, think about it this way.
per month,
Let's
or
take an
what?
example. Let's say you upload a video on Twitter.
Okay.
And let's say, or not Twitter, let's take YouTube because YouTube takes longer format videos, right? So
Right.
you upload a 10-minute video on YouTube and you upload it for some inexplicable fucking reason in 4K. And
Okay.
YouTube compresses the shit out of it, but it's still roughly a gigabyte,
Okay.
because it's 4K.
Right.
Right. So you have and that's just for ease of mathematics. So you have this 10-15 minute video, it's a gigabyte of storage, people start streaming it in 4K. It goes people start streaming it in all kinds of formats, right? It
Right.
goes wide and it hits a million views, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a million views, that's a million times a gigabyte. It's a
Mm-hmm.
million gigabytes of data transfer sent all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
Guess how much that would cost you? Put that on Oz. Put that on Oz and see what kind of bill you'll get from Amazon afterwards.
A hefty bill.
A very hefty bill. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was, a video like that will cost you like $10,000, and I mean, of course, that's not what YouTube pays out for it because they run their own servers and their storage clusters cost them a lot less money than what they would rent it out for.
Mm-hmm.
But the point that I'm trying to make is this shit costs money, and if you aren't paying for it, then someone has to. And why are you acting so fucking surprised that they're spying on you? How else are they supposed to make money?
Selling you stuff?
Well, then people get bitch about that. They're like, oh, well, that's what Facebook is trying to do right now. They're trying to sell you shit.
Selling you its services to be connected with your family or friends or whoever.
But that's an option that I would love to see Facebook pursue. What I would love Facebook and YouTube and YouTube is kind of doing it with their YouTube Red. I think they're pricing their product a little bit too expensive. I believe, but because with YouTube Red you can over with a YouTube subscription service, I think it's like $15 a month, but it eliminates the ads on the videos that you watch. It allows you to download the videos to your phone to watch them on your phone, and you can do that in different ways, but in any case, and it allows you to not have ads, and they don't collect ads, and they don't target you, etc., etc., etc. So that's all wonderful, right? But you have to pay for it, and it's about $15 a month. If it was 10, I would probably pay for it. But
it's a bit pricey, isn't it?
it's a bit pricey for what it is. It seems like, and I think it's a bit pricey for what it is because it's like
They want to include like random shit that you don't need, like extra programs that YouTube like feature YouTube shows or
oh
whatever.
yeah, those
And who
featured
needs
content.
that? Like-
Yeah.
Like knock off some dollars and more people would sign up for YouTube.
Yeah, if it was $5 for just no ads and downloading the videos to your phone,
I think a lot of people would buy that service.
I think people would buy that, yeah, and then just not pay the extra $10 for all of their Jake Paul bullshit and content that they're doing with that asshole. So I think they dropped him too, but just the fact that they considered that more of a person is insulting. But in any case, I would love to see that from Facebook, whereby Facebook, you pay them $5 or you pay them a few bucks a month, and based on that, they would not collect data from you and not um, spy on you in any particular way, and just provide you their core services
Right.
uh,
And
at
also,
the cost of $5 a month.
you could also customize what you want to see on your wall and, what kind of ads you may want. Like, for example,
Why would you want to? Well, the whole idea,
not
you pay
ads.
$5 and they just no ads.
Okay, so just like the people that you want to follow, basically.
Yeah, you can follow
Because right,
people. You can also choose whose content you see and you don't see, and it's not up to the algorithm anymore. It's up to
right,
you to see who you want to see and who you don't want to see, who you want to interact with. I think it'll be a valuable service for also anybody who wants to run a community. Because Facebook right now has these tools. If they could actually charge community organizers uh,
tools,
for tools essentially, and
right.
and then have the community organizers use Facebook tools, I think it'll be kind of cool, especially if you want to start communities, like private communities, and you don't want Facebook to police anything you do inside your own private group. Then that's up to you, and they can fuck off.
Right, I think that would be invaluable to people who want to organize themselves online.
Yeah. So there's many things that Facebook could innovate towards. But the thing that people are blaming them for, which is basically people are
Neutralizing their competitors and going after small companies
yeah.
in order
There
to.
was a lot of thing made out of the fact that Zuckerberg said that um, it's okay if there is any startup that's threatening our market position, we would be able to buy them. He didn't say buy them at an unfair price or crush them, right?
Right,
He said we would be able to buy them and compete in that market ourselves.
right.
That
Bill
seems like,
Gates used this strategy all the time with his Microsoft
well, and I think this is why
company.
Microsoft was also investigated for like
Antitrust
antitrust. And quite honestly, like see what happened to Microsoft. Like nothing happened to Microsoft despite the antitrust. They
investigations.
just separated a little bit their companies and recombobulated it back into a single company. Nothing happened. Nothing at all. Um, as a result, and they were a legitimate monopoly at that point.
Why do you think there hasn't been more successful social media companies, even though in today's environment we've seen the rise of TikTok, especially during
Well, TikTok is
the pandemic lockdown?
no. It's important to also notice why TikTok became popular.
Oh, why is
Um,
that? Why do you think that is?
I think it's because they provided tools that I've said it many times before that I think the key to, and this is I think what you wanted to talk about, is innovation. The key to innovation, generally speaking, um, for the last 20 years or so in the computer industry has been taking tools that are available to few
Mm-hmm.
and giving them to the masses,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we can see that with originally we could see it with GeoCities, which is the original social media network back in the you know 1996, 97, 98. There was GeoCities, which was
Okay.
obtained by Yahoo eventually, and that was just a website where you can go. They would assign you for some reason back then. Um, we really haven't like figured out how the whole internet is going to work with like IP addresses or not IP addresses, like web addresses and such, or usernames. So instead, they would give you like a street address, but it would be like a fake street address. So it would be like GeoCity/235/Rockford Street or some bullshit like that. I forgot exactly how it works, but it had like neighborhoods and stuff. And you would go there and you would stake out um, a site, and that would give you some number of megabytes. I think it was like 15 megabytes or something like that of storage, um, and it would allow you to make your own web page, right, with HTML and pictures and videos and things like that. Well, not videos back then because 15 megabytes of storage doesn't carry a lot of video, does it? So what was happening then is they were giving individuals, tools that were otherwise at that point very difficult to come by, because back in 1996, setting up a web server was kind of difficult. Even having a and constantly connected internet connection was kind of difficult. So as a result, giving somebody access to set up their own server, and or not their own server but their own website, and have things on that website be hosted, is very, very very useful for uh, for people, and it became popular. And then we had MySpace, and MySpace took it to the next level, where they gave people the ability to like blog and post updates and stuff without necessarily knowing how to do HTML. You could do more on MySpace if you had HTML skills, but if you didn't, you could just do your thing, and kind of but basically MySpace brought web development to individuals who were too dumb to figure out how to do web development, or didn't have the skills to do it.
Right. It allowed people to do more enhanced media, as far as I could tell.
Yeah, and then Facebook came along, and Facebook allowed you much greater communication between people, and allowed you to be able to communicate and interlink with people on a much more sophisticated way. And now they're providing you tools for organizations, and supplanting things like, for instance, the BB forms, the bulletin board forms. Whereas in the past, you would install something like BBPHP on your own server and start your own community, right? And that community would allow you to have members and to have discussion groups and stuff like that. Now all that stuff has moved to Facebook, because Facebook is providing you those same services, but without the need to know how to set up BBPHP, which could be involved for some people who don't know how to do it. And that requires you to run your own server, to run your own upload server, to manage it, to update it, yada yada yada. It's complicated, and they took out that complexity. So now, if you want to set up your own community, for instance, for a hobby that you enjoy, you can just go and create a Facebook group in a matter of like 5 minutes, or less, really. Versus an hour or so project for somebody who knows how to do it, which would take to set up BBPHP, and of course, days and days for somebody who's never done it before, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're removing friction from different things that were previously available to people who were techie, and now available to everybody, right? Instagram did that with filters for photographs. Most people take a photograph, other than paint, they don't know what the fuck to do with that photograph. They don't know how to adjust anything in the photograph. If Apple didn't build it into like the little Apple thing, most people don't even know how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Instagram did it very easily. They gave you a preview that's like, oh, you click here, it does this, you click there, it does that, and gives you like a preview of a bunch of different filters. You apply those filters, you upload the photograph, boom, right? So the Instagram became popular because it brought the ability to apply filters to their photographs to people in a very simple and intuitive way, whereby even those with the IQ below 100 were still able to, fumble their way through it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And don't forget what George Carlin said: imagine how stupid the average person is. Don't forget that half of them are dumber than that. So bringing technology to the idiots of the world has always been profitable.
So TikTok did something similar?
So TikTok did exactly the same thing. They started by bringing technology to the idiots of the world by allowing them to sing along with certain songs and or certain portions of movies and stuff. And what it would do is use AI to speed up or slow down the videos so that the mouth of the people would somewhat match the words that were playing in the background. So what you can do is you can take a song, or you can take a scene from a movie. You can play it to you. You can talk, and then the software would match your voice to the sound to make it look like it's you speaking, right? Something that was obviously very easy to do for somebody who knows how to edit video, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it would take you 10 minutes or something to edit that together. It's not very hard.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are the average person or worse, then you have no chance in hell to be able to do that. But now you have this ability to amuse your friends and yourself by doing just that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as a result, TikTok became successful because they brought technology to the idiots of the world, right? And then they also did this thing where it automatically cuts out the background behind you by using the phone, and it uses artificial intelligence to figure out which pixels are the background and which pixels are you. It doesn't do a particularly good job of it, but it's again good enough for the 50th percentile.
Mm-hmm.
And
Wow, you're really selling me on
Oh,
TikTok.
and all of a sudden, you don't need to know how to use green screen. You don't need to know how to use chroma key deletion. You can just do it, and it won't be great, but it'll be half-assed okay, and that's all you need to do, right? And that's why they became popular. So kind of note to all of our listeners. If you do something on a regular basis that's kind of techy and difficult, and you constantly have your idiot friends asking you how to do that, there's probably a very successful tech business in taking whatever you are doing and bringing it to the masses. Because that's every single large business in the last 20 years on the internet has been built by doing just that, taking tech and bringing it to the masses.
Right, just like one of my favorite companies, Canva, which just takes like doing graphic design for your business to an easy level for people who don't have Photoshop or graphic design skills to make flyers and banners and social media postings.
Because it's just a website of templates, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Same idea.
Mm-hmm.
Same idea. So you can see it. You can make it on a small scale, right? Especially if it's a particularly technical skill. So no matter how much you simplify it, people still need like to put a little effort and thinking into making it nice.
Right.
Right. So it can be something smaller scale, especially for businesses, or it can be much larger scale, like TikTok for the consumers.
Right.
Out there, but the formula is exactly the same in every case.
Podcasting. There's a great opportunity in podcasting, and I know that a lot of companies like Himalaya are trying to make podcasting available to the masses.
There is an opportunity in podcasting. The problem is that I don't like where it's going right now with podcasting, because I think companies like Spotify and Himalaya are going to snap up, and because podcasting used to be a very open field. With an open standard, with a standard where you post a podcast and it's available on many different programs on many different platforms, because it was a standard platform independent format, right? The XML format for the podcast and such. And then now they're doing all these proprietary podcasts, like creating walls and separating the podcasts out and stuff. And I don't like where it's going, but you can't really stop it. I mean, if there was if there was an easy way to make I think if it was an easy way to set up things, even like Facebook, like if there was an easy way to set up Facebook groups, but on your own server, people might do it. If there was an easy way to host podcasts and make money off of them, but on your own server where you're in control, people might do that. But it's just a much more difficult proposition, and the money really is in. It's essentially, if you think about it, I never thought about it this way until just a moment ago, but it's basically franchising. If you
What
think
do you mean?
Well, think about it. What did Blockbuster do? Blockbuster Video was a huge company. Obviously, they came up from nothing and they built up into an enormous company, and then they failed because
They failed to see the future.
They failed to see the future, right?
Right.
But what did Blockbuster do right? They took all the mine paw stores that had shitty technology, lack of availability, and bad computer systems to track their movies and inventories and stuff, right? They took that and they organized it, and they basically gave them a toolkit that they can use to improve and modernize their store. And thus became very successful, right? That's franchising. Same thing with McDonald's. McDonald's took a standard restaurant model, right? Cleaned it up, fixed it up, and created a McDonald's U, like the university, McDonald's University, that educates people on how to run a fast food store. All of a sudden, anybody who has $1 million saved up or $2 million or whatever it costs nowadays to open up a McDonald's, I don't remember. But anybody who wants to, you apply, you get in, you graduate from their school, you invest money into it, and they basically make sure that you're going to be more or less successful by essentially spoon feeding you the tools necessary to become a more or less successful entrepreneur of a McDonald's. That's the point of franchising, right?
Right. Yeah.
So that these tech companies, either consciously or subconsciously, took the same exact model, and they're spoon feeding technology to idiots. That's where the most of the money is nowadays. Spoon feeding technology to people who don't understand technology.
Right.
Right? Just like in the 90s, he was spoon feeding business strategies to mom and pop shops that didn't have the best of business strategies.
You know, that's a very good observation.
Yeah.
Another gaping hole that I see in the market that needs to be filled by somebody who knows how to do this are car entertainment consoles. Somebody needs to go in there and revolutionize car entertainment consoles.
Well, we don't have any of the newer cars. In both cases, the newer cars have, or rather, I said in both cases prematurely. Whether you have an Android or an iPhone, right? In both cases, that's how that ties in. Modern cars come with CarPlay, which is Apple CarPlay, or Android Car. I forgot what the Android version of it's called, but it's the same concept. When you link your phone to the car entertainment system, what happens is it starts transmitting data to the car system,
Right.
and the apps that are in the car system actually run on your phone. So like you can do things like play Pandora, or use actual Google Maps or Apple Maps to show you the map on the console, and it even uses, I think, the GPS built into your phone to figure out where you are. Or you can also supplant it with the GPS inside the car. But the point is that these car consoles are becoming better. The issue isn't so much how out of date they are. The issue is how out of date they are, actually, mostly. Because the car consoles that you see in cars in 2019, 2020 are the car consoles that were designed in 2016. Because everything or 2015, because
Right.
everything in the automotive industry moves at a fucking glacier pace. And for some of it, it makes sense for it to move at a glacier pace, right? Like, we haven't had a marvelous innovation in the internal combustion engine in some. We have little efficiency improvements here and there, and we keep shaving down the thing. Nothing has monumentally shifted in internal combustion engines in the last 30 years. Well, what was the last innovation? In direct injection. Now they have direct injection, where instead of injecting the fuel into the intake, they inject the fuel directly into the cylinder as the piston comes up. And then even that, we found out, was kind of a bit of a fuck up, because it strips the rings on the pistons of the oil and shit. So what you actually have to do is, and it doesn't clean the engine enough, because the gasoline has a lot of cleaning agents at the same time. So now Toyota, for instance, has to put two fuel injectors, one on top of the cylinder, injecting straight into the cylinder. That's for idling and more efficient running. And then one outside the cylinder, port injection, just like we did for the last 40, 50 years, to do the cleaning of the valves and cleaning of the valve seats and all that stuff. And
Why is there a suit that develops there?
yeah, the
Or
suit just developed. What happens is it burns on the suit, and it also burns on the oil directly onto the valves, and then the valves don't seat properly. And the gasoline has cleaning additives added to it, and gasoline itself is actually a very good cleaning agent. So what happens is, as you spray gasoline into the intake, it rushes past the valves, and as it rushes past the valves, it washes off all that soot and all that garbage that accumulates on the valves, and then just burns it up and throws it up into the
Exhaust.
exhaust. Yeah, it vaporizes it. But if you don't have that, then over time it builds up that, and then just doesn't seal the cylinders right, and you lose compression, and then you lose power, and then next thing you know, you need to rebuild the engine. Even they went up. So basically, what I'm trying to say is, in general, in the automotive industry, there isn't that much innovation except in self-driving cars and car entertainment systems, right? So you would think car manufacturers would be smart enough. I know it takes years and years and years to plan out the tooling and to plan out the equipment that you need to manufacture a new model of cars, but all of the entertainment systems fit in the same fucking space. You can just order that about a day or two. Well, I'm kidding, not a day or two, but it wouldn't kill you to order those like the same year you actually start producing the car, as opposed to placing the order and signing the contracts 5 years ahead of time on that garbage.
Right.
And also, I think in the automotive industry, there is a lot of this old timey thinking going on, like the kind of thinking where people are buying through dealers and buying through their connections and stuff like that. Not car dealers, but like parts dealers.
Right.
So
well, they work on the old model.
They're
an ancient, well, not an ancient, but an ancient industry. They've been around for 100 years or so.
Yeah. I almost feel like maybe there's no way for innovation to, because originally we wanted to talk about innovation in this podcast, right?
Right.
And but do you want to finish up? What do we think about the big tech?
No, we failed to talk about Amazon and the accusations that are being thrown at Amazon on how they gather customer data about what's popular, and then they make their own version of that product, and then thus cutting out the third-party sellers that sell that good. Say, for example, they see a certain type of t-shirt that's very popular, and then they say, well, we can make our own Amazon Basic that's similar to that t-shirt, and undercut them.
Yeah, so I think that's a little. So there is a good example of what Amazon doing is bad. I think some of those examples are bullshit, though, like the ones you said about the t-shirt. Because here's the thing: how are they preventing innovation, right? If there is a particular white, like let's say Hanes brand makes t-shirts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Amazon notices, hey, we sell mostly Hanes brand t-shirts, and these t-shirts are mostly popular, right? Or rather popular, right? So and it seems like all that people want is just a basic white t-shirt for wearing underneath your, dress-up shirts or whatever. For whatever the fucking reason you need white t-shirts, people want to buy them. I'm pretty sure we can source them, so let's sell them. That's the thinking of Amazon, right?
Right, and there are companies, like you pointed out, like Costco, who also know about consumer habits, and they know about, the price of Bounty,
Yeah, so if you
blame
Amazon for that, you have to blame Costco for it. You have to blame Walmart for that. What about Walmart with their Equate brand, or Costco with their Kirkland?
Yeah.
So, or the Great Value brand. I think Equate is more for.
And Whole Foods does the same thing. They have Whole Foods is owned by Amazon now, but
yeah,
they used to have their own in-house brand.
Well, they still do, the 365.
Right. Yeah.
So, I don't see that particularly as monopolistic either. But there has been a rather publicized instance in the past where an Amazon. There was a microwave, like one of these smart microwaves. Now, I have no fucking clue why anybody would want a smart microwave.
You forget that microwaves are really popular in America.
Okay,
this is I'm
not
college
saying
students feed themselves.
I'm not saying I don't understand why people would want a microwave. I don't understand why anybody would want a smart microwave.
Okay.
Right? The one that talks to you and shit.
Ooh, fancy.
No, it's not. It's stupid.
I think those projects have been really popular on Kickstarter.
Yeah, and because people are fucking morons.
Okay.
Because this is like one of those
I
things
think
you.
you're over exaggerating.
No, I'm not exaggerating. People, first of all, people are fucking morons. I have very low opinion of most people. But that aside, there's no need for a smart fucking microwave. You shove a popcorn in there, you press a button, boom, it makes you popcorn. You shove a piece of meat in there, you press a button, boom, it makes you a piece of meat. You don't need to talk to your microwave to do it, right?
But if your user experience can be so much better,
But it
because
wouldn't be. It would be
talks to you.
no. It would be slower because it takes me 1 second to activate a microwave. Boom, boom, boom.
That's true.
I don't have to have a conversation with my microwave in order to start it or stop it. This whole voice interaction with shit, that's gonna die out.
I'm sorry, Star Trek.
Yeah,
You're never...
Star Trek was wrong. Star Trek was 100% wrong, and that shit is gonna die out because people don't like it. Even the morons amongst us don't like it because then they try to use it and they realize how shitty it is.
What about that whole smart speaker situation? Which
Yeah,
was
those
like,
nobody's using those. Your brother has like 5. He doesn't use any of them.
computer, please make me some peppermint tea.
Yeah, nobody gives a fuck about those. And then I bet you there's a bunch of people listening to this and right now, and they're like, "Oh no, I love my." No, you don't. You don't like your Echo speaker. Nobody likes their Echo speaker. It just is there. It plays music for you, and that's why you like it. You don't like the fact that you can talk to it.
And maybe no one uses Siri either.
Yeah, nobody uses Siri. God, no. Siri is a fucking retard. Yeah, God.
Did you hear some company in China is suing Apple for like $1 billion or $2 billion for infringing on their Siri-like patent or something?
I'm sure. I'm sure the patent is unique and innovative and everything. I'm 100% sure that it's not a bullshit scam just to extort some money out of Apple. Anyways, that was sarcasm if it was obvious. But going back to Amazon.
So how
though,
is Amazon being monopolistic?
So what happened is there was a company that created one of these idiotic smart microwaves, and they used Siri technology not Siri, Alexa technology, because Alexa technology is licensable and you can just shove it into your products. And I think they shoved it into a product, and I think Amazon had the same attitude as I am, that who would need a smart microwave? People can't possibly be that stupid.
Okay.
And then
they were proven wrong.
They were proven wrong because this company sold a bunch of microwaves on their on Amazon's platform. Amazon looked at it and they were like, "Oh, well, in that case, we're gonna make a microwave too." Right? I guess people are that stupid. If you're listening to this on YouTube and you have one of those microwaves, and you hate me right now, you should downvote this video. Downvote it as much as you can. All engagement is good. Anyways, so they produced another version of that microwave that was made by Amazon. It was like Amazon Basic retard microwave, and it sold for them really well, and they put the other company out of business. I forget what the name of the other microwave company was, but they put it out of business because they were able to sell their microwave, the Amazon microwave, basically at cost, or possibly even below cost, because they didn't have to pay for any kind of licensing of the software. It's all their internal software. I'm not sure if the other company had to pay for it, but the other company was trying to make a profit. Right? It's much like, I'll be a little vague here, but it's much like when we were involved in a project a few years ago, and we were trying to build a product that was a nice and innovative product, but the components for our supplier, the supplier of the components for that product, also made a similar, or less quality product, but they were selling it for the cost of the components alone. Right? So if you say it's,
and that's a strategy that a lot of people use to gain market share, right?
Yeah, and the reason why it makes, so in that case, the reason why it made sense for the supplier is because they were supplier of widgets, and those widgets were necessary for this product. They figured we might as well make the product, since the major cost of the product is in the widgets that we make anyway, and we'll just make the product. We'll make the money on the widgets, right? Same thing with Amazon. They figured, we make Alexa. right? We make money off of Alexa. We
Mm-hmm.
subsidize those speakers, those smart speakers. They're all
Mm-hmm.
subsidized because they're
Mm-hmm.
all sold at cost or below cost.
Mm-hmm.
The reason for that is because they make the money on spying on you as you use the Alexa. Because you basically see, here's the thing: if you buy an Alexa and you put it in your house, you're basically putting a spy in your house. Imagine it's like putting Jeff Bezos, like tiny little, like every time you see an Alexa speaker, just pretend it's a tiny little baby Bezos just sitting there listening to everything you say, writing it down to use against you in the future. That's what it really is, right? So the more Alexa speakers you have, or Google speakers, that's what it is. It's a little spy in your house that constantly listens to you. And
Whoa, why can't the same thing be said about phones? If you have a smartphone, it could be spying on you.
well, if you have a smartphone, it can be spying on you. But most phones, you can actually that's not their primary function.
Mm-hmm.
The primary function of a phone is to, watch YouTube videos or go on line or occasionally make
Search
phone
for
calls.
directions.
Yeah, but you can also, and so you can disable it. So you can disable Hey Siri, or you can disable the Google Assistant if you don't want it, or you can enable it so where it turns on only when it turns on, right?
That's a little creepy. Having somebody listen to you and not actually acknowledge that they're listening to you, basically.
Yeah.
Because I think most people would forget that these smartphones are always listening to you.
Again,
I'm sorry, it's smartphones. Smart
speakers.
speakers.
Yeah, but because that's the only way you interact with them, right?
Right.
With a smartphone, you can disable all of that voice interaction.
And all you got back from the company is saying, I assure you, we are not using this data to harm you.
Even though they repeatedly have shown that they don't have the greatest control of the data that they're sending out, right?
Right.
Or that they're collecting on you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the point that I'm trying to make is that they make the money from putting spies in your house,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they don't need to make the money on the microwave.
On the hardware, yeah.
So as a result, they sold it at like $200, where the cost of components alone was like $230. Don't quote me on it, but something like that. And the competitor was selling for like $400, right?
Mm-hmm.
So of course people are not going to pay $400 for something that they can buy from Amazon with warranty, and they know it's going to work fine because Amazon has decent engineers and shit. For $200, right? What they don't understand is the first company was making money from selling them the hardware and had the interest of serving them in mind, presumably.
Mm-hmm.
And Amazon doesn't really give a fuck about the their experience with the microwave. What they want is another Alexa in the house,
Mm-hmm.
right? So from the consumer point of view, it's a little bit iffy, right? But from an anti-competitive point of view, I can see how that can be deemed somewhat monopolistic. But like, what do you do about it? Because the question is, not only can you identify companies that are acting in ways that are not ideal, like I think in this case Amazon is not acting in an ideal way. I think they are stifling, or at least they're killing off the competition because they're not really competing with the competition. They're figuring out the trick that the competition has and just taking it for themselves, but they're not interested in competing in that market.
So that's not very honorable, is it now?
It's not very honorable, but what do you do about it without stifling the competition? What do you say to Amazon? You can't engage in any business that someone else has engaged. So let's say somebody out there goes on and makes a smart.
That's a little scary, actually.
Yeah. Because let's say somebody goes out and makes a smart toaster. I don't know why you would want a smart toaster, but let's go with it. And they make a smart toast, but it's a piece of shit. It's an utter piece of shit. It burns the toast. It sets on fire. Occasionally, it tries to murder you.
So there's a great opportunity for somebody else to come along
Exactly.
and improve on that smart
And
toaster.
then Amazon looks at it and says, God, we had like 5 customers die from this toaster this week alone. We have to discontinue this toaster. People seem to want to have cheddar while they're toasting their bread. Let's make our own. And then the government comes in and is like, no, you can't make your own. Your customers must continue to die, and so on and so forth, all in the name of innovation, because this shitty company needs to be able to be the only company who gets to make a smart toaster for foreseeable future. That makes no sense either. That makes no fucking sense either.
Mm-hmm.
The whole point of competition, you can't you can't kill competition and then claim you're doing it for purposes of fostering more competitive markets.
That's true. But what can we do about it? Like you said, what can we? It's not like you. There's a law that says you can't compete against your, people you see are doing something interesting.
Well, so let's see where this can go with Amazon, right? So right now, Amazon sells products to peoples, and and people buy those products, right? And Amazon is becoming more and more powerful because they're providing services like inexpensive or easy to do returns, fast deliveries, things like that, right? So the way you would compete with that, the way you would foster competition as the government is maybe by spurring competition and by preventing, for instance, places like USPS or UPS or FedEx from signing exclusive deals with Amazon. For instance, whatever deal UPS gives to Amazon, they should give to any competitor who meets certain criteria,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like certain shipping numbers, for instance, right? And
Mm-hmm.
those should be low enough to where even a smaller size business will be able to obtain those numbers, right? So, like for instance, if it costs Amazon $10 to ship a package that a private business, like a smaller business, would pay $20 for, well, that's where you chip away at monopolies
Mm-hmm.
at those levels. I feel not at the top because whenever you chip away at monopolies at a top level, it doesn't really do much other than um,
They're just gonna find another creative way to get around it.
yeah, it's just not very effective. I mean,
Right.
look at AT&T. They broke up AT&T before.
Right.
Now we still have AT&T.
Mm-hmm.
They broke up the mob. They called the mob Bell, the Bell companies
Mm-hmm.
were all organized. It was all AT&T. They basically
Owning all the telecoms.
yeah, all the telecoms. They all broke it up. Now it just reemerges itself like the fucking Terminator 2 reconstituting
That's
itself
the
from
awful
little
company
bits.
that it is right now.
Yeah, and AT&T has always been a shit company even back then, and
Yeah.
now it is too. But it's fully reconstituted. Nothing happened to Microsoft either. When they were broken up as a monopoly, they weren't actually fully broken up, but you know. So you have to instead figure out why is it that a monopoly has advantage over an individual retailer. Well, first of all, individual retailers in and of themselves, I think, need to die out,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I don't believe that there is any value in this dealership network, this distributor network. There's no value in it, I believe, because if basic
There's simply an obstacle. They're a barrier for the consumers to get the product that they want, and the manufacturer is missing out on the profits that they could be capturing.
yeah.
That the
So what Amazon offers to manufacturers is they basically offer them saying, "Hey, we can do uh, sales, marketing, and distribution
mm-hmm,
for you.
mm-hmm,
All you got to do is produce the product, ship it to our warehouse, and we'll take care of the rest. I mean, you still have to put together nice photos of your product, yada yada, but I mean, you do that anyway, right?
yeah,
And then after that, you put it on a website and we'll take care of shipping, we'll take care of checkout, we'll take care of all the technical details for you. We'll ship out the product, the customers will get it, we'll take care of the returns, and we'll send you a check for the amount of product that we sold, right?
mm-hmm,
So they're acting basically as a retailer, right? But they're acting as a global retailer, one that lets you control your own warehouses and stuff like that. And people say, oh, well, they're putting out of business small resellers, small drop shippers and stuff like that were drop shipping independently.
mm-hmm,
And I say good, because those drop shippers didn't have they're not providing service.
mm-hmm.
They're just assholes who are trying to take advantage of being middlemen in some kind of way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But how do you then chip away at Amazon's advantage, thereby allowing other companies to come in and service the market, because you don't want to have only Amazon, right? You want to have Amazon, you want to have eBay, you want to have Banggood. The other big companies are things like Banggood, Geekbuy, and some other ones. There's a bunch of smaller subsets
Mm-hmm.
that operate on a similar model, where
Mm-hmm.
they are fulfillment centers all for Chinese manufacturers,
Mm-hmm.
right? The problem is that Amazon is also just basically one large fulfillment center for Chinese manufacturers, right?
Right.
Now, I would say there is a market gap there. There's a market gap for some of these independent dealers, right? As they call themselves, to go in and find the best of the best products, the ones that are hard to find, actually examine the merchandise, examine how good it is, find quality factories, whether it's in China or in India, or even maybe in America, ones that output good quality, right? And then build their brand the products, and then build their brand on the fact that they retail only in high quality products, even if they come from China, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, right? Now that's something that I say middleman. Then you're no longer a middleman. Then you're actually providing quality, valuable service to people, right? If you go to China and you examine 15 widgets that do the same fucking thing, but one of those 15 widgets is actually high quality and does what it says on the tin, so to speak, and then the other ones are just garbage, right? And you go tour the factory, and then you tell them, okay, I'm going to take shipment from you guys, but I want to make sure it's only this product. I know they all look the same, but I'm only buying this. I'm not buying, I'm buying
So you're
this.
doing quality assurance?
You're basically doing quality assurance for your cars, because quite honestly, I'm sick and tired of ordering shit from Amazon, receiving it, and just going into fucking rage about how shit of a quality something is.
And how some sellers lie about the features of the product that you
Oh
just
yeah, like
bought.
half the shit that I return to Amazon is literally just marked inaccurate website description, because the other day we were purchasing an air conditioner. It was fucking hilarious. It said it's maximum 8 amp draw at 12 volts and maximum input of 450 watts. Now, if you take 8 amps and
Mm-hmm.
you multiply it by 12 volts, it's like 96, if my math is correctly. That's not even close to 450 watts. So
Yeah.
it's literally some Chinese person somewhere sitting, and they look at other air conditioners, and they're like, oh, they have that, and they have that, and they have that, and they're like, oh, okay. Well,
Ding!
yeah, they're like, that air conditioner is 1200 watts. Ours is much smaller. It probably feels like 450. Let's just put 450 watts, because it kind of feels like 450 watts. You know, and what are the other numbers that we have there? Who cares? They feel right. Who's gonna say?
Right.
So so quality assurance of the products that you're selling
It's a real
is a
value
real
added.
value. So you want to compete with Amazon, compete that way. I think somebody can come out.
Well, eBay, in a kind of way, has added value to their marketplace by having seller reviews, seller
No,
ratings.
eBay didn't do shit. The sellers added value to their own stores. So there are some sellers on eBay where you buy one product from, and then you're like, oh, I want to buy from the seller. And until they disappoint you, you usually try to buy it from them, because some sellers on eBay actually make sure that they have quality products,
Yeah.
right? That they take delivery here, especially the ones that ship out of United States, if they're shipping it out themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem with eBay and with Amazon now is that in a lot of the cases, even if it's being shipped out from United States, in a lot of the cases, it's just a Chinese seller who's just virtually remotely managing warehousing here in the United States and just shipping out of the warehouse, even if it's on eBay,
Mm-hmm.
right? And and some of them are honorable people with very good products, and some of them are people with shit products. But you're right. On eBay, you can kind of at least judge whether or not somebody is decent and buy from the decent sellers. On Amazon, you can't even see that, right?
Right.
So what you really want to do is kind of like
Do a combination of both product and seller review
yeah, you
to
need both.
really filter out the bad sellers.
Yeah, because on Amazon you see that a lot. You see that where you see a product and it would be like very well reviewed product, and you're like, oh, well, why did the thing that I got was such a piece of shit? And then you realize that it's just quality fade. That yeah, like 2 years ago, it was I'm looking at a desk fan right now. So 2 years ago, as an example, it would be like a very nice desk fan, and people would leave really positive reviews, right? But then the same seller would notice, like, hey, the factory down the street also makes a desk fan that looks identical. Their quality is much shittier, but their price is half the price. Who cares? I already have a bunch of good reviews. I'm gonna start mixing in some of these items in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it just becomes a crapshoot.
Right.
Just like with Amazon, it was a crapshoot where people were selling like fake goods on Amazon, but they would be mixing it in with the real goods. And even if you buy for were fulfilled by Amazon,
Mm-hmm.
half the time you'll be ordering like a product, like say a Parker pen,
Mm-hmm.
like a high end pen or something like
Mm-hmm.
that, and half the time it will be fake because well, Amazon wasn't really controlling their suppliers a lot close, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there is a lot of room for improvement, and I think there's a niche to compete in, and that's why I don't see Amazon as a monopoly yet. I may change my mind in the future if they become more and more of a monopoly and they start to, force other people out of the market. So Amazon, I would say, is by far the closest to a
To a
monopoly
monopoly.
that I see
What
from
about
that.
Google? Do you think Google should be broken up, or do you think the accusations hurled at Google had any weight behind them?
Well, let me backtrack. First of all, I don't think any of these companies should be broken up. I think that's just not an appropriate way to respond to monopoly power,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because a lot of the times the fact that a company is joined
Mm-hmm.
and vertically integrated is actually good for the consumer, and breaking it up is actually bad for the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
It
the
usually spells higher prices as
higher
well.
prices and actually, ironically, less choice because complicated reasons. Anyways,
When natural monopolies rise, it just means that the market cannot sustain multiple companies.
exactly. So instead, what you need to do is um, level the playing field for much smaller companies.
And that's where my question is, how do you foster innovation in a landscape that has huge monopolies that can squash you at any point in
Well,
time?
first of all, you prevent them from being able to squash you. That's like the main aspect. So you investigate that ferociously.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody reports that they've been squashed by Amazon, by let's pick Google for instance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we talked about Amazon. It's not very clear how Google is a monopoly. Um,
Except in the search.
well, they're
And
okay.
so the accusation was that when you search on Google, they will feature their products, their pages, and anything else that they have first.
So here's a common then complaint that people lobby against Google, right?
Okay.
They say that on Google, if you search something on Google
Mm-hmm.
and let's say you search something kind of obscure. How much I searched this today? How much gold is there in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Total, it's
Mm-hmm.
roughly
In
200.
terms of weight, or
Yeah,
in terms.
200,000 tons,
Mm-hmm.
FYI, and 198,000 something. So roughly 200,000 tons of gold. That's all the gold that has been mined in all the years that ever. So that was on a website, gold.org, which is like whatever, a website that's dedicated to all about gold, and but I didn't have to click on the website and read their web page in order to glean that information. I was able to just type in Google how much gold is there in the world, and it was able to show me in the little explanatory paragraph at the very top with the source below that it's 200,000
Tons.
tons,
Yeah.
right? And then underneath it had a link, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people primarily say, oh, well, that's monopolistic because then if you search for this data, you have no incentive to actually click on the link. Therefore, if there's any website built-in ads, or if this company is also like, gold.org, maybe they also sell gold. I don't know. Maybe they it doesn't matter. Maybe they're putting up the website for a reason. Maybe there's some kind of way they're trying to monetize that website. If I don't click on it at all, then they don't get anything out of me, even though they provided me a piece of data via Google, via the
Mm-hmm.
byproduct of Google. And
Mm-hmm.
Google didn't spend time researching that data or putting it together in any particular way. All it did is it gleaned it from their website and gave it to me,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and people cite that saying, well, that hurts
Competition.
individual small websites, and I
Right.
think individual small websites are actually being hurt quite a bit right now, right?
Yeah.
They're being hurt quite a bit right now because people just, if they don't find it on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, they think it just doesn't, or TikTok, they don't think it exists in the world. Like if you find something on an actual website where you go and somebody runs it on their server and it's an HTML, it's hosted from some dude's computer
Mm-hmm.
somewhere. Most people in America don't interact with that kind of usage of the internet on a day-to-day basis, ironically enough.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to stimulate more of that, make websites more popular. And I think maybe we can do that by making them more app-like, which is kind of where things are headed with HTML5.
Mm-hmm.
But generally speaking, with Google, that's the main thing that's lobbied against them, that they take data, they suck the data out of the internet, and then they repackage that data for their users
Mm-hmm.
in such a way that it's more convenient to consume it through Google than it is to consume it through the originator of that data.
Mm-hmm.
My counter argument to that would be, well, how is that any different from basically any retailer? Google is basically a retailer of data as opposed to a retailer of stuff, essentially,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I just repackage the data to sell it to you in exchange for your attention. I don't know. It's actually difficult to think of a solution to that. One
A
that,
fair solution to both
well,
parties.
I would settle for an unfair solution if it was actually one that would provide the right results,
Mm-hmm.
like innovation. But what would be the solution that would provide the innovation?
It's a mystery covered in jam.
Yeah. So, well, let's brainstorm. So, what would be a solution that would allow you to, for instance, you can forbid Facebook from, I'm sorry, Google. You can prevent Google from
Scraping your site.
scraping the data. Well, they have to scrape the data to make it searchable.
Right.
But maybe you can institute a new rule that says that if a business wants to put very specific, like maybe the business can have, maybe we can create a HTML tag, one that very specifically puts all the data that the people want to expose publicly, kind of like a storefront.
Mm-hmm.
If you, maybe a good analogy for it would be a storefront. If you think about it, if you have one of those businesses where where you have like a glass storefront, and then you go deeper into the business, and there's more and more products on the shelves that are
Right. Like
not
a,
on the
like a
storefront.
glass display.
Yeah, like
in
a
the
glass
in
display.
the
Yeah,
storefront.
maybe there could be a storefront HTML tag, one that for every page puts all the data, all the textual data that they want Google to be able to find
To extract.
and extract into that storefront tag, and then everything else in their website is hidden, whereby you have to click on it and actually look at it in order to see inwards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Give the choice. I would say give the choice back to the website owners.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have a storefront tag, then Google can just scrape your entire website and do as they please.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do have a storefront tag, then you are telling Google, "Hey, I actually am trying to make a business here. I don't want you to
scrape this data
scrape the data
use
in
it
its
for you.
entirety.
Yeah,
Here's some data for you to be able to classify me.
that's a good middle of the way, middle
And that
compromise.
well, because it gives it gives the innovators the choice. Because
Yeah.
maybe you want Google to have all the data on your website, because maybe you don't you make your money in another kind of way. I don't know, right? So the more choice you give to the uh, you basically have to ask individual, well, because if you ask individual like news agencies what they would want to do, they say no, we don't want Google to scrape our websites because they scrape our websites, and then
Our
nobody
traffic decreases.
our traffic decreases and then we can't.
Make a living.
Um, but they're not the best judge of what's best for the world, because they clearly suck at innovation. I mean, because it's kind of amazing to me that newspapers didn't recognize the fact that they were a dying medium the moment the internet became somewhat popular. Like I'll give them a pass in 1985. I'll give them a pass in 1995. But 1998, if by 1998 your newspaper company did not realize that they're royally fucked and that they need to start investigating.
They need to pivot quickly.
Yeah, pivot quickly into maybe the same business, collecting and digesting information, but they need to figure out how to make money off of it, and they need to figure out the angle in which they're going to sell it sooner rather than later. Um, they basically dug their own grave, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, it's really hard for those sort of legacy companies to think in terms of like changing landscape, because they've settled so hard on their traditions. And when you're a traditionalist, there's no fucking way you're going to let go of tradition.
Well, and also they're making a lot of money from
Yeah,
at that
but
time.
we've been entrepreneuring like for the last 10 years, and we see the landscape of technology change very quickly. And you don't even have to be an entrepreneur. You can't, your business can't basically stay the same way forever.
Yes, but what you're missing from this equation is in any circumstance like that, the reason why it's so difficult for large companies to pivot with times is because the right time to pivot is the exact time when you want to pivot the least.
So when you're when you're the busiest, when you're raking in a ton of money.
Yeah, you're busiest, you're raking in a ton of money, you're on top of the world, you're at the apex of your company, right? And that at the apex of your company, right? You look around and you realize that things are about to change dramatically, right? But there is an incredible momentum, because what it means is you could say, I can see where this is going. We need to shift. We're going to do major changes, and we're going to make half as much money next year as we did this year, all because we want to make sure that we continue to exist 30 years from now and thrive.
So that's going to be hard on everyone.
But everybody in the middle, especially, maybe the people at the bottom of your company will be like, yay, maybe that's an opportunity for me to move up because I have some innovative ideas, right?
Shine.
But everybody who's in the middle just, grabs on with their teeth, their claws, and everything else that they have to the position that they have and say, no.
So you will have to drag them kicking and screaming into the future.
Basically, yes. So and that's what happens every time the corporation or an organization, because it doesn't just have to be, people always blame the government and they say, oh, the government is so inefficient, the government is so shitty, right? Well, the government didn't used to be inefficient.
And
the government didn't used to be shitty. They used to be efficient. They used to be good.
right.
And then they became inefficient and shitty. What it is just a standard life cycle of any organization.
This really brings up the question, do you think it's the management's responsibility to be to be visionary, or do you think it's the management's responsibility to be listening to its employees, looking for the next opportunity, looking for where they can go that's new?
I think it's a moot question.
Why?
Well, because you interrupted me while I was trying to explain to you why it's a moot question.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Well, you don't have to be sorry. Just think about it. Why is it a moot question?
Because
You're basically saying, well, let me summarize it in a different way. You're basically saying, is it the managers, is it the heads of the company? Let's pick on the CEO. Is it the CEO's job to lead the company in a particular direction, or is it into a particular innovative direction?
mm-hmm.
Or is it the CEO's job to listen to the employees and the customers and figure out which innovative direction to lead into,
Mm-hmm.
right? Without those two dichotomies, presume one very important assumption
What is that?
that the CEO has any interest whatsoever to go in an innovative direction,
Oh, okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying, oh, now that we decided that CEOs should go into an innovative direction, which way should they go in an innovative direction, right?
Yeah. And the response is sometimes leaders or CEOs are not looking for innovative directions to
No,
go into.
in all times, always, leaders and CEOs of companies who are not the originators of the company. If you didn't build the company, if you had built the company, if you are like a CEO like Mark Zuckerberg, right, or Jeff Bezos, right, you are more likely than not to try to innovate because that's just your personality. But with all companies, over time, it takes about 40 years for a company to go from the stage where it can innovate to the stage where it can no longer innovate.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why it can no longer innovate is because of the law of this dude who came up with it. It's not really a law, it's a theory, or I should say a hypothesis, but it's a very accurate hypothesis in my experience. And that is that over time, no matter what, in any sufficiently large bureaucracies, and any organization at its core is a bureaucracy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So over time, in any sufficiently large bureaucracy, there will be people who are devoted to the goals and the mission of the bureaucracy, and there will be people who are devoted to the maintenance of the bureaucracy itself,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the people who are devoted to the maintenance of the bureaucracy itself will always win out and destroy and otherwise expel from the bureaucracy the people who are interested in achieving the goals of the bureaucracy, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to imagine it. So let's look at it as an example.
So is it sort of like if we want to be the best bookseller and we have an organization that, takes that has that goal, what you're saying is that half, say we have 100 employees, half of those employees will be, just maintaining the everyday goings of that company, and the other half will be trying to figure out how to sell books in the best way possible, in the easiest, most efficient way possible, or what are you saying?
What I'm saying is, let's say you have a best bookseller, like as your example, right?
Right.
Or somebody who strives to be the best bookseller, and half, forget about the percentages of the halves and whatever, right?
Right.
Some of the employees in the organization will actually listen to the CEO and really believe in the ideal that they want to be the best book store in the world,
Mm-hmm.
since that's what we decided to go with,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that they will look at things like saying, oh, well, if we are the best bookstore in the world, then we must provide access to innovative books. If we're the best bookstore in the world, then we must carry books that other bookstores don't carry,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then there'll be people in that same organization who say, well, some books are controversial. We don't want to be controversial because that can cause problems for,
A subset of our
for
audience.
a subset of our audience, and more importantly, that upsets Gerald in accounting.
Oh,
And
so.
Gerald in accounting is more important than the mission of this corporation.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is people working for the corporations start to value the structure of the corporation more important than the goal of the corporation. So again, let's say you're trying to be a
Mm.
best bookseller in the
So
world.
I finally get it. I finally get what that quote
Yeah.
means.
So you want to be a best bookseller in a store, a better, more direct in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there are some people who run around trying to find the best authors, the best whatever, right?
Right.
And then
And there and
you
that.
realize, hold on, just give me a second.
Mm-hmm.
Then you realize that you also sell CDs in your store, right?
Mm-hmm.
But nobody buys CDs anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like people still kind of buy books, nobody buys CDs because CDs are dead, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you continue to maintain and drain money into your CD department, not because your CD department is aligned with the mission of your company, not because your CD department is important to your shareholders or economically valuable to the corporation, but because there is like 10 people who work in that department and they are good friends of yours that you play golf with,
And you're
and
afraid.
most of those people will be reassigned to other departments, but the head of that department, there's no other major department, he will have to lose his job or be reassigned and be lowered in his status. And as a result, you as a dutiful member of the bureaucracy seek to preserve the structure of the bureaucracy at the cost to the overall goal of the corporation itself.
Ah, that's difficult. That's a difficult position to be in
Yeah, and that
for most
naturally
humans.
happens. That naturally happens when you have people coming in mature companies. Basically, let me put it this way: as soon as your company has an HR department, that's when you know you are starting to die.
Mm.
That's
But you need an HR department if you're a company of any size.
yes, and that's why you know you're starting to die.
Mm.
Because as soon as you have an
All of a sudden, I'm sorry to cut you off. I could see this company, this bookseller who sees that, perhaps people are not reading as many physical books as as they used to in the past, but they have the opportunity to go into audiobooks, and then people like you mentioned who want to keep the structure of the company and
yeah,
who want to save their best buddy's job and status and lifestyle
yep.
cannot make the hard decision of saying, hey, we are shifting and we're pivoting towards audiobooks.
Well, not just necessarily, but ebooks would be a
Right.
great example, right?
Ebooks or audiobooks or whatever.
With ebooks, think about it this way: with ebooks, by shifting to ebooks, you would have to make the decision that says, "Oh, we are no longer paying lavish lavish parties and gifts." Um, for when we send out our scouts to go to different publishers and stuff, we are no longer sending people to book conventions, right? Because why
Mm-hmm.
the fuck do you need to go to a book convention when it's ebooks and you can find it all online and you can
Mm-hmm.
meet people online, you can read things like we no longer need to go to these conventions and things like that. But if we do that, then all of a sudden we need to lay off Mike, the sales guy. And Mike the sales guy is a great golf player, so I'm not gonna go in that direction because that means pain in the short term. It's like it's like with anything. It's you can directly correlate it to life in general, to human beings in general, where people are generally speaking would always put off pain in the short term rather than avoiding a lot more pain in the long term. It's like
Mm.
you get a hangnail, you get like a piece of wood stuck underneath your skin, and instead of being in pain for like 5 or 10 minutes while you're taking it out, you leave it in there, and then you're in pain when they chop off your finger because it became gangrenous and shit.
Mm-hmm. Oh, boy, oh boy. These
So
are difficult
so it's the
decisions.
same thing here. These companies are malignant. When they get to that stage, like look at IBM. Look at what happened to IBM. Or look what happened to Intel. Intel is the best example of that. Intel still can't get their shit together. They still cannot get the 7 nanometer process worked out, and they
Mm-hmm.
are dying as a company right now, all because they have old and aging engineers that
Mm-hmm.
are completely out of their depths when it comes to the modern engineering practices. Not all of them, of course, but a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't kept up with the innovations. They were at the top for such a long time that they became fat and lazy. And that fat laziness comes from a different mindset. That it comes from a mindset when you start protecting what you have instead of trying to get more. right? Amazon is still trying to get more, right? But Intel started to protect what you have, and once you start protecting what you have, you start slipping into that in the other mentality, right? Where it's no longer about the truth. It's not longer about. It's about the bureaucracy.
Yeah. And when you start going down that path, I think your company starts dying.
Yeah. And let me point out, by the way, why people hate bureaucracies, right? So bureaucracies are very necessary for maintenance of operations of anything, pretty much. Bureaucracy is basically another way to think of a bureaucracy is a heuristic for managing large amounts of people, right? Or large amounts of data, for that matter, right? If you exist in any society that's larger than 250 people, the Dunbar's number, or whatever the fuck it is, 250 to 500. If your society is larger than 500 people, you're physically incapable of keeping track of everybody. You need a bureaucracy, one that organizes the people in such a way that you can make some kind of stereotypes about people. Like, oh, one that has this card is licensed to drive a car, right? Like, you don't know if this person is licensed to drive a car, but you ask them, like, do you have a driver license? Okay, now I can entrust you, I think, with a car, maybe. Most drivers are idiots, but you get my point. So it's the same thing. So that's a function of the bureaucracy. But the reason why people hate bureaucracy is when the bureaucracy forgets the point for its existence, right? And the perfect example of this is the example from today in the morning. A friend of mine called me up and told me that he ordered a new computer. The computer came in a box. The box was completely destroyed.
Oh.
Like stabbed not multiple, but stabbed, like somebody basically dropped it on the corner, like on a very hard surface and just like crashed half of it, right?
That's not good.
Well, it's he's just gonna return it. He already returned it, and he ordered a new one. It's not his fault, and let the insurance pay for it, right?
Right.
But the point is that on that box, there were at least 5 huge, large stickers that said, lithium battery inside, potential fire, be careful. Right? Not a single fucking fragile caution sticker. But they did put 5 enormous, big lithium battery caution stickers on this computer. This computer is not a laptop. It's a desktop computer. The lithium battery that it has inside is one of those coin-sized batteries, the ones that you put in watches.
Oh.
Like the Casio watches have those coin-sized batteries.
Yeah.
That's the fucking it is a lithium oxide battery.
Right.
But it's a tiny fucking lithium oxide battery, and one that has it's fully encased in metal, and one that has the kind of chemistry that it's non-rechargeable lithium battery. It doesn't set on fire. Those fuckers don't burn. But the morons at the bureaucratic agencies that require you these stickers say no. Lithium battery means sticker. Lithium battery. It's like mouth breathers. So if you ever see somebody who breathes through their mouth, how stupid that person is. That's why people hate bureaucracy, because every bureaucracy after a certain while basically becomes a mouth breather.
So they become dumb as fuck.
Yeah. By the way, if you breathe through your mouth, close your mouth, breathe through your nose, it literally makes you dumber because it limits the amount of oxygen that can propagate into your brain. And over time kills brain cells.
Thanks for the wellness alert.
Yeah. Okay. I ran out of things to be enraged by.
So shall we close up this podcast?
Did we solve innovation? No.
No, we did not. But we studied the problem.
We studied the problem for sure.
Yeah, and that's the beginning to understanding how we can innovate, because it's difficult. The truth is, it's difficult to innovate. And it takes a certain type of person to innovate.
I just think innovation cannot happen in large companies, quite honestly.
And this is why a lot of large companies do corporate venturing.
But that. So innovate. Let me rephrase it. Innovation cannot be done by large groups of people. You can have a large conglomeration of people, like Amazon, for instance, right? Can set a small team aside and be like, hey, small team, go and completely independently develop blah.
Yeah.
And then blah, they just like they did with Oz, Amazon Web Services,
Right.
which started out as web services for themselves, and then they kind
Right.
of created the market.
And or the Amazon Kindle or the Amazon Echo thingamabob. Yeah.
Well,
Those are all small teams. They start as small
yeah.
teams.
So you gotta start with small teams, and you gotta let your teams innovate, and you have to tell your teams that their existence, their success or failure is their own, and that they shouldn't worry about the major company. And you also have to ruthlessly destroy in your company, fire in your company any person who takes the welfare of the company itself over the overarching mission of the company, right? And that seems counterintuitive, right? But that's the only way you get back innovation, right? And I think the reason I don't entirely agree with Eric Weinstein. He takes offense to Weinstein. I don't agree entirely with his assessment, but he is right in one sense that over the last since the 80s, so that will be 90s to 2000s, 2010, so the last 30 years or so, actually like more like 40 years, the people who would perkle up to the top of most corporations are people who are most willing to lie on behalf of the corporation, right? Because all these corporations have embedded debt, growth debt. What does it mean to have embedded growth debt, right? If you base your corporation and you base the promises that you make to the people when they enter your corporation on the premise that you will continue to grow at 10% per year, or 20 or 30 or whatever, right? And then your growth slows down to zero, like it did in Intel, like it did in IBM, like it did in many of these other companies. Yeah, sure, Intel and IBM grew financially, but they haven't really created that many more leadership roles at the very top. And if you look at how old the people are, and Eric Weinstein always complains about how, for instance, if you look at major universities, the deans of those universities 40 years ago would be in their late 30s to like early 50s. Kind of like late 30s, 40s, early 50s, like the prime working years of people, right? When they kind of achieved something. That's when you would have the deans of those institutions, right? If you look at average age of people in those institutions right now, at the very top, it's dead. It's basically people in their 80s and 90s, and you know, they're basically both feet and five fingers in the grave. So, but they're not letting go of those positions. So there's not that much to travel to the top, right? So the only way you can logically project yourself, propel yourself through that hierarchy, through that bureaucratic hierarchy, is if you're willing to lie for the hierarchy. They need to lie for the hierarchy because they need to get all those graduate students to teach for free and to provide all the services for free, right? Basically, because
and what's the carrot dangling in front of them?
Well, the carrot dangling in front of them is that you will get a professorship, and then eventually you'll get tenure, and then you'll become a tenured professor, right? And then, the world is going to be your oyster, right? Only the reality is that you will never become a tenured professor, let alone become a full staff member.
Is it because there's too much competition, or what?
There's not enough places.
Right.
Think about it this way. Every 4 years...
So we need to make more universities, too.
Yeah, but there's not enough people.
Okay.
Who are you going to educate? And there's YouTube.
Okay.
We don't need that many. We need people to do those jobs, but we don't want to pay them to do those jobs, right? So we fool them into thinking that they can get something even better later, but they don't get anything better later. It's the same thing in the corporate world. And so he always talks about it from the point of view of universities, but it's no different in the corporate world, where a lot of the people at these older corporations, they're quite old. They're quite old,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not stepping down and pushing people up to
Mm-hmm.
take their place. And
It's because they've come to identify themselves as their job. Like, they have lost all meaning in life, I feel.
I think so too. I think people no longer look to, well, I think people treat their jobs too much as their like end all be all. I think it's because we work too much as a culture, Americans as a culture work far more than almost anybody except Asians.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, even there, I don't know. I would dispute the fact because I feel like the Asian culture didn't always used to be like that.
Mm-hmm.
They always were very studious, but I don't think they were always very workaholic. Like
Mm-hmm.
when things are good in China, people get as lazy as anybody else.
Yeah.
Here in America, people are really, really obsessed with not so much working, but with accumulation of money in in almost unhealthy ways.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, um,
It's
it,
and you don't think it's just like the cost of living is so high that you have to keep working because your job is not paying you enough to meet your basic necessities.
but do you need to buy a car every 3 years?
No, you don't.
Do you need to live in a very fancy house?
No, you don't. But
Uh,
a lot of people don't have very fancy houses.
not very fancy houses, but a lot of people have fancy houses.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, ones that are brand new, for instance, instead of buying an older house and fixing it up.
Right.
Right? I'm not saying that there's like as a whole in America, people do exist certainly in ways um, that are basically they're living outside their means. Is it impossible for people to live within their means in America?
No.
No, they
But
just.
that means denying yourself personal gratification. Like instant gratification.
But doesn't it also mean getting other personal gratification? Like, for instance, if you had a choice, not you personally, but like as if a person had a choice between working 80 hours a week or working 40 hours a week and spending the other 40 hours a week learning how to play an instrument, like a guitar, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe playing a guitar would bring them a lot more pleasure than buying shit that they don't need on Amazon and then returning it.
Right.
Or
Or hanging out with their friends
or yeah, or sitting around and talking to their friends.
yeah.
You can do that for 40 hours a week instead
Right.
of feverishly working on motions and reviewing documents. So my point is that I think we have an unhealthy preoccupation with material acquisitions.
And funny enough, I think that having leisure time leads to innovation
Yeah.
because it makes you less stressed. It makes you kind of think clearer, and
Well,
allows
it
you to
gives it gives you time to think.
yeah, and to process the world in a different way than your usual routine.
Yeah. And people will call bullshit on this, but you can see this even in China. Even in China, there are people who are looking at this modern way that they're living, and their extenders went up and stuff, and some of them are returning back to their ancestral farms and trying to start like organic farms and stuff because they're like, fuck this. This is too hectic. This is not making me happy. I'm not happy buying more little toys and stuff like that. Maybe I will be happier just sitting on my farm and watching the wheat grow or something like that, or watching my rice grow.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm not saying we should all come back to that kind of existence. What I'm trying to point out is that sometimes we are preoccupied with our job, and that makes us be like the leading, you know, leading producer of bureaucracy in the world. But of course, you get other bureaucracies. I mean, look at Europe and how bureaucratic that those people are.
Yeah. And how little innovation comes out of Europe.
Yeah, but just keep in mind that when you hate bureaucracy, what you're really saying is you hate enormous stickers on coin-sized lithium batteries. You don't necessarily hate the fact that you have street signs that are all in the same font, or and we're back. We just had a technical difficulty. A battery died on a voice recorder.
Hello.
Yeah. What were we talking about before?
We were talking about innovation and bureaucracies.
Well, we basically kind of roll. I think we'll just finish up this podcast because my train of thought got disturbed by the failure of a AA battery in a Zoom recorder. Um, so just keep in mind that you don't hate all bureaucracies. Bureaucracies are good if they're operated well, because a bureaucracy is just your ability, or is just a it's just a system for you to be able to navigate a world with more than 250 to 500 people on it. But uh, bureaucracies that exist for their own sake, not for the sake of the people who they're serving, are the enemy of, well, everything that's good.
Yeah, so for me, it's like organization of your house. You want to make your life easier and you want to organize certain things, you know? And
Well, yeah, that's bureaucracy of your house.
yeah,
Saying I put all,
all
all
pots next to the stove.
yeah, all pots next to the stove, and then you find one pot that's just like enormous and won't fit there, but you're like, no, but I have a rule that says I put all pots next to the stove, so it's gonna go there, come hell or high water, and that's the problem with bureaucracies. They're not flexible enough. So I would say you never want to have a bureaucracy whose main goal isn't to stop existing. You should have suicidal bureaucracies, meaning bureaucracy should only exist for as long as one of the individuals in that bureaucracy hasn't figured out a way how to make it not exist yet, right? So if you have a bureaucracy that ships batteries, if you are head of the bureaucracy, that one that puts battery labels on packages for Amazon, and then all of a sudden somebody invents like a bag into which you can put a product, and then you don't need the labels because it's a fireproof bag that's like super cheap to make, or fireproof box that's super cheap to make, and you can ship lithium batteries all over the place without any kind of worry. I mean, this is entire fantasy, but like imagine if that happened, right? You should have the kind of bureaucracy that will be happy about the fact that they're being dismissed, not sad about it, because anytime you can get away, you can achieve the same goal with less bureaucracy. That's better. That's better for innovation. That's better for everything else. And you need to structure your company in such a way that people who work, basically, you should hire every single person and be like, hey, if you can figure out how we don't need you to do this job anymore, please let us know. We'll find you a different job, a better job, but we'll
Mm-hmm.
get rid of this job.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do this job if there is no reason to do it.
Right.
Let us know. That's how you foster
Definitely
innovation
fosters innovation.
in your company. But people have to trust you. You have to actually hold up your end of the deal as a company. You have to, if somebody comes along and says, "Hey," it's like that kid who invented himself out of a job when he invented the reciprocal dealio for switching the pistons and the steam engines back and forth. I don't know if you read the what the fuck is it? It comes from a book written by a dude in 1800s. So that it's like the industry of the nation or some shit like that.
It was Sapiens. I think it was
No,
Yuval
no,
Harari
no,
who makes
no,
mention of
no.
that.
Yuval Harari did not write books in the 1800s.
No. But he makes mention of that story.
Yeah, he
I
might,
think.
but the original story comes from a book from the 1800s,
I
which is
don't
called
know.
"The Industry of the Nation." If I remember correctly, it was written by one of our founding somebody. Can't remember right now, but in any case, the part of the story is that if you're familiar with the way the steam engines work, they move the piston back and forth, back and forth. So you let in the steam pressure from one side of the piston, it moves forward. Then you turn off the pressure from the forward side, and you put it in reverse, and then it goes reverse when it reaches the end of its shaft. So back in the beginnings of the steam engines, people would hire young kids to sit there and just basically flip a lever back and forth, so when the steam piston reaches all the way to the front, the kid flips the switch to the back, and the piston starts moving back. Then the kid flips the switch forward, and back and forth you go, and boom, there you go. You have steam engine. But some kid figured out that if he just takes a string, ties it up to the lever, and ties it up to the actual piston, and aligns it all perfectly, then the piston, when it gets to the end of the shaft, will naturally move the lever automatically back and forth, and then the kid can just sit and relax, right? Well, and then that kid's reward was the fact that he was fired promptly from the job, and somebody patented that invention. Or I don't know what happened to that invention. But the point of the story is that's an improper incentive. If you want your employees, if you want the people who make up your company to actually work towards making your company better, you gotta reward the people who actually make your company better, not the people who are only watching out for themselves and their friends.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You have to reward the kid who invents a lever that allows you to work 10 times as fast and not have to hire the kid by making him like the fucking chief innovator for you, or just giving him enough money to live on for the rest of the life, because it's just, that's the only way you get innovation, is if you properly incentivize people to innovate.
So this also kind of means that we have to let go of some of our Puritan beliefs about working.
Yeah, work is evil. Anything that we can do to work less is good. That's the thing that we don't understand. People think that there is something natural and good about work.
But not necessarily do less, just become more efficient at doing the things that we have to do in less amount of time. Right?
Yeah, I suppose that's true. Because, yeah, that's where it's heading. It's not heading towards where humans will not work at all, but it is heading towards the era whereby, even something like two people doing the job of three people causes 33% unemployment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same concept everywhere else. We're moving closer and closer to basically automating a lot of the jobs, a lot of production jobs. And when that happens, what do we do with the humans? That's something that we need to address, because if you want innovation, you'll need to get humans to think and innovate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyways, let's finish it up here, and we'll continue later. And I'm learning right now about Detroit, and we can talk about it later and how that fell apart. It's an interesting story. It's very much a parallel for today's time and era. But I think some of that is missed. Because a lot of people think that also Detroit and many of the other manufacturing companies here in America have failed because of outsourcing to overseas, which did happen for a lot of light manufacturing, but a lot of heavy manufacturing here in the United States, even in automotive plants, has just been automated. Automated. Can't speak anymore. We don't realize how many jobs have been automated rather than outsourced.
Yeah, well, that's part of the changing technological landscape.
Yeah.
And I think it's only just going to accelerate in the future.
And the reason I think people don't realize that we have automated as many, it just literally occurred to me right now, so I just wanted to share it and touch upon it later. I had to think about it a little bit more. But it occurred to me that most people whose job has been automated don't even know that it has been automated. Meaning,
why is that?
Well, think about it this way: if you let's say you designed a 1984 Jeep Cherokee, right? And in 1984, the best way you could put it together is by having people come in there and spot weld all the panels together, right? So you set up your jigs and you set up your manufacturing plant in such a way that a couple of guys come in and start welding in the panels for the Jeep. And it rolls through the assembly line and gets to the end, right? Halfway, let's say that's 84. Now let's say now it's 95 or 94. 10 years went by, right? And you're about to update the model, right? Before that, even if like automatic welding robots were in existence, right? Before that, you wouldn't bother to redo the manufacturing procedure that you were doing for the most part, unless it was such a huge advance that it was definitely worth it. For the most part, you wouldn't bother to update your manufacturing procedures because it would be more expensive to reset up the production line than the amount of saving that you would derive from an automatic welding robot that comes in and welds automatically those panels, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to updating the whole model and now building a new platform, meaning you're setting up a new factory, you're setting up a new production line, you're setting up a brand new, like basically it's a brand new project, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's when you bring in your automated robots.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, the way it looks from the perspective of the employee whose job it was to weld up the panels
Mm-hmm.
is, oh, I had a welding job on an assembly line for Jeep, but then they discontinued that model, and I tried to apply somewhere else, and I just couldn't get a job.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't hiring anymore. Maybe those jobs went to Mexico. What you don't realize is, no, those jobs actually went to robots in many cases,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the reason the reason you didn't see it, because it wasn't like one day you showed up to work and next to you there was a robot welding, and you're like, oh shit, maybe that's going to be next for me. That's going to come next for me. No, no, no. It happened in these large rollover projects where you didn't get to see the behind the scenes, where people have eliminated your job and you just didn't know about it. That's the thing. So you never got a chance to see your friends at your work one by one being replaced by robots. What happened is the project you were working on got ended. And then when the new project started, none of you were called back. And then you were like, oh, I guess they moved production somewhere else. But in reality, they're pumping out just as much. They're just not using your labor anymore to do it. And it's much more hidden. That's what I'm trying to say. Automation has become much more hidden, right? Like there was one time I saw a video on YouTube, and that one was probably right on the nose, where this dude at a factory was putting pipes into like this machine, and the machine would take the pipe and it would weld it down the line in the seam, right?
Mm-hmm.
So something, because the way they make this particular pipe is they would take a piece of metal, they would roll it into a tube,
Mm-hmm.
kind of, and then weld it down the middle, down the seam,
Mm-hmm.
right? So before it was done by hand. You would roll it, and then somebody would come in and weld it, right? And now you just put it in the machine goes bzzz, and perfectly welds it together, right? The dude was saying like, oh, this is actually much better because I get to do this and I don't have to bend down and weld this anymore. And I'm like, okay, dude, you still have this job because somebody at the shop likes you, right? But how long do you think it's going to be before, if your entire fucking job now is just to take pipes from this stack of pipes and place it inside this machine, do you honestly think these people in the next iteration are not just going to add a fucking arm to it, like an automated one that just picks up a pipe and shoves it into its own belly and then welds it up?
Right.
Like, your job is, you don't have a job anymore. Just somebody just likes you, and that's why they haven't fired you yet.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that happens everywhere. And people fool themselves into thinking that they still have these nice, reliable jobs. And they'll argue with me until they're blue in the face how no one can replace the innovation and the magnificent spirit of the magnificent human spirit. The reality of the matter is they're wrong. They're wrong. They're machines who do their jobs better than they could ever.
So we really need to think about how we're going to manage all of this.
Yeah.
Right?
If we think that human life matters, if we think that humans are special and we deserve to have a decent life, we really need to figure out what the hell is going to happen when all of our manufacturing jobs are taken away by machines, which you can say is not going to happen. But usually when people say it's not going to happen, what they really mean, oh, it's probably not going to happen this week. Yeah. But it was going to happen this fucking century, I can tell you that much.
Yeah.
All right.
And on that note,
Yep. All
we'll
right.
see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.